Welcome back, everyone. I am so glad to finally have the time and the mental clarity and headspace to record another video. The last several weeks have absolutely not gone the way that I would have liked. In my last video, I mentioned that we'd be coming back to Canada, which is where we are now. We are here just to visit family. I have a family member that is sick, and we obviously don't know how long they have, but we wanted to make sure to see them one last time in case this would be the last time we get to see them. Here we are, and it has certainly been an adventure getting here. We left Foz do Iguaçu on November 14th to go to Brazil, and then to Atlanta, having a connection flight there to Winnipeg. And we did not get very far before it got completely derailed. I was traveling with a Paraguayan passport and then my Canadian citizen in support, and thinking that it'll show that I'm a citizen and that I have the right to enter. We did not bother taking time out of our absolutely insane busy schedule of the last week before we left to research whether or not I'd be able to get in with my Canadian citizen while having a Paraguayan passport, because of Bill of Rights, Section 6.1 state that every Canadian has the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada as they please. I did not see why I should not be able to get into Canada. This entire trip, just the way that it has gotten derailed, it has ended up costing us about 6,000 extra Canadian dollars than what it initially was supposed to, just to get my daughter and myself here. So we flew from Foz to Sao Paulo, and that is where I got denied my next connection flight to Atlanta, because I did not have a US visitor visa, which we should have looked into that. We do carry some responsibility here and the reason that my trip got completely derailed, but I thought that having a Canadian citizen would at least just get me through, since I had proof that I was just a connection and I was leaving there. We only had a 5-hour layover, so it wasn't even worth stepping out of the airport for, and I was told I could not travel through, and then that is where I had to stay behind from the rest of my family. Because we didn't want this trip costing us any more than it absolutely had to, my husband and our oldest 2 kids still kept on the route that we initially had planned, while me and our youngest daughter stayed back in Sao Paulo. She absolutely was terrified of the idea of separating from me, so I figured I'd just keep her with me and not put that on my husband to deal with a screaming kid on the airplane yet. And she was absolutely brilliant. I cannot have wished for a better kid to have en route with me in such a stressful time. So they ended up rerouting us through London, England, and here I was thinking, like, I'm just trying to get to Canada as fast as I can, as easy as I can. And at first I kind of freaked out internally just a little bit, but I figured, this is what I gotta do. So I ended up waiting till the following night and then left for London. Now, I did every step of the way. I asked, can I use my Paraguayan passport to make this trip? And they had saved me a space, or reserved me space, all the way going to Canada. And I was told yes, that I could, with the documents I had, travel now into Canada. And again, I figured, well, okay, I'll just take the next step. I'll go to London. And that is where I asked again, can I use my Canadian citizenship to get into Canada? And that is where I was told no. And this felt like such a violation of my Canadian rights. Like, what is the point of having proof of Canadian citizenship and you are absolutely denied your rights? And I know you should have a passport to travel, but once in the end, I'll explain why I felt like this was such a violation when I explained how Paraguay works in these sorts of situations. So I ended up staying in London for the Friday, and I was supposed to be leaving there noon. And I really quickly tried getting in a temporary passport there at the Canadian Embassy, which ended up taking well into the afternoon. So, okay, I was gonna have to book the rest of my trip all over again. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that I have found whenever you're dealing with government officials in any other country besides Canada, it is so much easier dealing with the Canadian government officials in another country than Canada. They were absolutely fantastic in London at getting me the best solution, the quickest solution to get me out of there, so that I did not have to wait the entire weekend through waiting for documents so that I could get into Canada. It had already been a terrible, stressful week but I was really grateful that they took extra time to make sure that I got what I needed and was able to get out of there. Another reason that I thought this should totally work, traveling with a Paraguayan passport and a Canadian citizen, is because I personally know somebody that has in the past been able to get in with a Canadian citizen, and they have never actually resided in Canada. They just had the Canadian citizen right through parents who were born here or already had a Canadian citizen and always lived their entire lives in Paraguay, but they managed to get into Canada. So after being en route for 3 days, I finally left London at noon on Saturday, November 18th, and I was so terribly exhausted at this point. There is one thing I forgot to mention. There is such a thing as an electronic travel authorization, which I initially tried applying for in Sao Paulo already because I was directed by Air Canada line to do so. It would get me into Canada and only be valid for 4 days. But I was denied that because I had a Paraguayan passport. They accepted just about any country passport for this, but not Paraguay because they don't have a visa exemption agreement with Paraguay. And a visa I also could not get because I hold a Canadian citizen. So I ended up getting the temporary passport, which is good for 1 year, and then I'm trading that in here for a 2-year passport. Had I known that a temporary passport was that quickly to obtain, I would have done so in Paraguay, but I had no idea. These are all things that, I don't know, to me they are relatively new, never heard of it before. But from London, the rest of the travels ended up being fairly smoothly. And me and my daughter, we were just both completely maxed out of our energy. And then we went into a time zone where we had 6 extra hours to our day. But what matters is we are here, finally made it. We've experienced something new. And I can tell absolutely everyone, if you're Canadian traveling anywhere, make sure you have a passport because your citizen certificate does not give you as much right as you might think. Now, over to other countries and rights through being a citizen. If this was Paraguay, I would have never run into this situation because you can literally enter Paraguay with your Cédula card if you have it, which is pretty much just states the right that you have the right to be there and to live there and to enter, just like Section 6.1 in the Bill of Rights for Canada states. Even if the card is expired, you always have the right to come back in, which is part of the reason it felt so violating that I was not able to get into Canada, even though I had lived there for nearly 20 years of my life. And here they were challenging me being able to get back in. Another reason it is so incredibly violating is it is literally easier for someone who has permanent residency and has not taken the oath of citizenship to get into the country. They can literally take another passport from another country and their permanent resident card, show that, and get into the country. And so I'm kind of confused what is the point of a citizen card, or they now have these big forms. What is the point of that if I am not going to be able to enter the country with it? The one thing that it has done for us is reminded us of one of the reasons that we left Canada and why we are so willing to go through the hardship of starting all over again in a country that, as of right now at least, our rights are taken very seriously. As of right now, I do not make an income with YouTube. I am over halfway there though, which I am very grateful for. Thank you to anyone and everyone that has liked, subscribed, or shared so far. If you haven't done that yet, you are very welcome to do so. I would so much appreciate it. Certainly would help my family out so much.